Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. It depends where you are in the world. My name is Magdalena, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you to our webinar, The Role of Gender in School Leadership, Insights and Implications. Thank you so much for joining. As you may know, we are Global School Leaders, and for those who are not familiar with us, GSL is an international nonprofit organization focused on empowering school leadership to create deep, long-lasting impact using a contextualized and evidence-based approach. We do this from three pillars. The first one is building an evidence base. The second one is building partnerships. And the third one is driving systemic change. Since the beginning at GSL, we've been interested in how gender plays a role in school leadership. We've seen that most efforts usually focus on helping girls directly or sometimes teachers. Realizing this, we decided to take a different approach by focusing on school leaders. This led to the development of our first gender program called Shakti, which trains school leaders to adopt a gender-inclusive strategy for bringing girls back to school and keeping them there. We've now rolled out Shakti in more than 5 countries and developed new programmatic content. Alongside our practical work, we have been also researching the broader impact of gender on school leadership, particularly in the Global South. This research has culminated in the publication of a literature review of the topic that we are now presenting. In today's webinar, we will focus on that review, which is the impact of female school leaders' educational outcomes. To start, I want to give the floor to Gautam, our Director of Research, who will share some of the main points of the evidence to help frame the conversation.
Yep. Thank you, Maggie. And hi, everyone. So we would all agree that in the Global South, the education systems are facing a learning crisis. And a lot of reports recently have pointed out at some data that hint at that. And for example, 7 out of 10 children are not acquiring minimal proficiency in learning by age 10, which is like 70% of the children are not acquiring that, right? And through this report, we argue that improving female representation in school leadership role could be a strategy that has the potential to address some of these challenges. And challenges like improving student enrollment, retention, learning outcomes, and gender equity in access and outcomes. And in the next few slides, I'll try to give an explanation to that argument. So a lot of research has emerged in the recent past where we see a positive association between female school leadership and student learning outcomes. A study in 14 Francophone African countries shows that on an average, the learning outcome in both mathematics and reading is higher in female-led primary schools than in the male-led primary schools. And even when we control for certain factors like the location of the school, type of the school, number of students in the classroom, these results persist in 4 countries where we see positive association between female school leadership and student learning outcomes. Similarly, in Lao DPR, the UNICEF Innocenti's work show that schools with comparatively higher learning outcomes are twice more likely to be led by a female school principal. Other than this, we also notice the potential of female school principals to become role model for female students in the school, and that can reduce the gender gap in learning outcomes in school dropouts. So UNICEF's research in Togo shows that female school leadership associated with better promotion rates to the next grade, also with like better learning outcomes. And similar result we find in Uganda, where engaging with a single female teacher in the school like significantly increased female students' odds of developing reading and writing skills. So we might wonder, like, why do we see this positive association between female school leaders and student learning outcomes? And the literature points us to a certain explanation there. So we see that female school leaders are more likely to create a stronger pedagogical and learning environment. And this is as specific as where research points out that teachers in female-led schools are more likely to give homework, ensure that students are comprehending the homework, the assignments, and doing it. Female school leaders also emphasize more on instructional leadership. They are more effective in managing talent and non-people management practices like operation and monitoring in the school. They also implement strategies that promote teacher attendance. They're more likely to engage with parents in their work, and also they are more targeted in their approach to address the challenges. And they're also more likely to be collegial, collaborative, and democratic in decision making. And all these factors differentiate their approach to leadership, and that might explain why we see a positive association between female school leadership and student learning outcomes. And we also try to understand like what can explain these differences in leadership approach, and literature do provide some explanation for that as well. So we highlight 5 factors here. The first is a more rigorous selection process for women, for them to become school leaders, because the process set that the administrative and policy setups are often discriminatory, and it requires more effort for them to become a school leader. And that leads to higher determination and motivation to prove their leadership abilities. They are also more collaborative and follow inclusive leadership style that foster team motivation and involvement. They are also nurture relationship that enhances school environment and teacher motivation within the school. And obviously, as we talked about, they serve as a role model for girl students and influence parents' expectations specifically around aspiration for their children. So with this background, we just wanted to also highlight 3 important things here. So one is that there's a need to expand this research base. As you see, like a lot of this evidence is correlational in nature and also come from Africa. So we need to also understand what's happening in Latin America, in the Asian context. Research also points out that there might be some potential reverse causality here, because female school leaders are more likely to be placed in urban schools or in schools with better infrastructure, and that might also impact student learning outcomes that way. And the third is that the advocacy for higher representation of female school leaders is not incumbent upon them being more effective than their male counterparts. So we don't want to unintentionally also mean that way. So that is these are the highlights from the evidence review. Please read the report for more information, and I'll hand it over to Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. As he said, I know this could be a lot of information, so if you are interested in reviewing it or doing a deep dive, please go to our website and download the report from there. But now let's move to the central part of this webinar, that is the conversation with the panelists. The goal of this conversation is to go beyond the review and push us to think about what are the key issues to consider, tackle, and do further research on. Today, we have perspective from various places around the world: Chile, Pakistan, Peru, France, with an extraordinary panel moderated by Aashti, who is the founder and CEO of Global School Forum. Aashti, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Maggie, and thanks, Gautam, for that excellent overview of the very compelling evidence on the importance of women's leadership to students' educational outcomes. And thanks to GSL for convening this really critical series of webinars. As Maggie said, my name's Aashti, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Schools Forum. We are a network of non-state organizations that are focused on providing quality, safe education at scale to children from underserved families. And in today's roundtable, I'm really looking forward to chatting with our excellent panelists about the ways and mechanisms through their experience that women leaders can foster positive change within educational institutions, particularly as it relates to students' educational outcomes and gender equity. We're going to focus on 3 sort of key areas, which I think are the main sort of areas that the report that Gautam mentioned kind of highlight. One is the role modeling and mentorship that women leaders provide. The second is leadership practices. And the third is the critical area of community engagement. We're going to make sure that we leave enough time at the end to just summarize what some of our next steps might be for our organizations and for us, and what some of the policy implications are, as well as make sure we leave time for you to ask any questions. Again, really do encourage you to post your questions as and when they come up in the chat function, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. But before we jump in, let me just introduce our fantastic panelists. I'll start with Eline Versluys, who leads gender at the UN Center for Gender Initiative. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative to promote gender equality in and through education. And then we have Sister Zeph, who is a teacher, a women's activist, and philanthropist. You may be familiar with her because she recently received the Global Teacher Prize in 2023. We're also joined by Franco Mosso, who is the co-founder and CEO of Enseña Peru, which is part of the Teach for All network. He also serves as the leadership specialist in change management at the Center for Adaptive Leadership in Peru. And finally, we have Veronica Cabezas, who is the executive director of Elige Educar, an initiative focused on teacher professional development in Chile. So we've got a diverse collection of experts and really looking forward to this. Let me first invite each one of you to just speak from your perspective about your experience in this area, as well as kind of your perspective on this specific topic. And if I might ask Eline to jump in first.
Thank you so much, Aashti, and thanks to all of you. I'm super happy to be part of this conversation because, as you might know, the United Nations Girls' Education Initiative mission is to advance gender equality in and through education. And we think that women's school leadership is a key element to achieve that big goal. We know now, thanks to the excellent work of some of our colleagues at UNICEF Innocenti and IEP UNESCO, that there's a growing body of evidence that shows that women school leaders have a positive impact on children's learning outcomes, but also on their general safety in schools, for example. But more importantly, I think it is just so important for girls and boys to see women in these leadership positions so that they themselves can aspire to those kind of positions and to any kind of future that they would want to invent for themselves. So we at UNGAI, we think it's absolutely critical to support women to access and to flourish in these leadership positions if we want to have education systems that actively foster gender equality. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's perfect. And Eline, I will invite you later on to comment a little bit more on that aspect of social norms and role modeling, because it's super relevant. Let me turn now to Sister Zeph. Sister Zeph, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aashti, for such a wonderful webinar on a very important issue, because since I have been working in a developing country, so I can tell that women have more potential, and they are multitaskers. And since women in many countries have been neglected for centuries, they have this urge and potential to prove themselves. This is why when we talk about the school leadership, for example, my school, I started my school in the courtyard of my home when I was just 13 years old because I was rejected. And women, as I was saying before, have been neglecting for centuries now. They want to prove themselves, and they want to learn, and they want to teach, and they want to make a difference. They want to break the taboos, and it's possible only through education. So I think if women have in a leadership role in schools, we have lesser dropout. And this is my personal experience because I have been working as a school leader for 27 years now. And I have seen from my school, only 5% children leave the school and 95% children complete their 10 years of education because they are loved and what they are saying, it is valued and they are heard. And in my school, we try to satisfy their curiosity by giving them this opportunity to ask as many questions as they want. So I think women have that capacity and that potential to make sure that every child is in a school for a long, long, long time until they complete their education. And we should give them more opportunities.
Thank you so much for that. And really looking forward to hearing more about your personal experience. Let me turn to Franco. Franco, please jump in now and tell us a little bit about your experience in this area.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I was extremely hopeful to see the review. We run part of our leadership programs are both for school leaders, but also for student activists. And so we've seen schools where both kinds of roles interact. And in particular, I do see with a lot of hope a parallel with other bodies of research. And in particular, we've seen in the last decade the impact of a student, for example, having a teacher that shares their cultural background. Well, in this case, I'm seeing the impact of a female student that wants to exercise leadership in her community with a role model at the head of the school. And I think that while the first piece of this whole body of research is extremely excited in relation to fundamental skills, I think there is an incredible opportunity to see what it does also in terms of agency and global competencies of citizenship, which are other parts of outcomes, what we're looking for.
Thanks so much, Franco. I definitely want to pick up that piece around kind of leadership practices and hear about some of the things that you're implementing at Enseña. Turning now to our last panelist, Veronica, love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this interesting discussion about more than personal experience, but some questions, because we know that female leadership is underrepresented in schools. And at the same time, we know because of the evidence that, for example, at least in Latin America, and I think for the South, we have similar numbers, that we know that women do much more time dedicated, for example, to household chores, apart from the work. In Chile, for example, women dedicate 3.21 hours more time spent daily compared to men dedicated to these household chores. And the same line, we have this research that we did during the pandemic. Well, we know that the crisis put pressure a lot on education and educators and teachers, but especially on women. Especially results show that the toll of psychological well-being was heavier for female teachers, and I can expand the results to principals. So these findings and what we hear today is my reflection is on the of course, we have high expectations. The results show a lot of the impact that female leadership has on learning of children. But at the same time, we have to take care of the well-being, the burnout, and how we can attract them, retain them, and take care of the well-being with different instruments, support, mentoring, maybe work, collaborative work between these female principals and leadership positions, because we need to take care of and acknowledge this reality and not just, put more pressure on these female leaders.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you so much for that word of caution. And indeed, it's the flip side of what Sister Zeph was talking about women's potentially have the ability to multitask, but what does it mean when you kind of don't get that balance right, and you really are seeing a lot of stretch put on teachers overall, men and women, to do a range of different activities, whether you're a teacher or a school leader. So absolutely, let's try and find a way that we can kind of bring that into the conversation. So with that, actually, each one of you spoke a little bit about the value of role modeling and mentorship, and Gautam, of course, summarized some of the research findings in that area. What the study does, what their review shows is that female school principals have the potential to be role models, mentors, and could be very instrumental in reducing the gender gap in student outcomes, and reducing school dropouts. I'd love to hear from you on your experience within your work or in previous roles where you've seen this kind of play out. And Eline, in fact, I'll invite you to go first, because this came out quite strongly in your introduction.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that role modeling piece is so important because it links to a broader issue about social norms and gender norms. And I think we all know that lack of women leadership in women in school leadership is so related to social norms that put women into specific roles, household tasks, caring roles, and that confine leadership to only a male area or a male characteristic. So we need to look at those broader social norms if we want to address the issue. And so, for example, one thing that UNGAI tries to do is to make sure that ministries of education look at that broader picture. And we've been starting to do a thing, what we call gender snapshot assessments with ministries of education, where we help them to look at gender data from a broader perspective. So, for example, we help them to look at data on women participation as teachers, as school leaders, but also gender norms more generally in society, and for example also women in the labor force in general. And so what comes out of these assessments is quite interesting, and I'm looking at the data right now. For example, in the African countries where we work, there's actually not only an underrepresentation within school leaders, but also within the teaching task force in general. So for example, looking at the data from Mali, among secondary school teachers, there's only 10% who are women. In Chad, there's only 7% women among the secondary school teachers, and in Liberia, only 6%. So there's a broader issue of women representation among the teaching task force. And then very interestingly, when you link those data to data on gender norms, you see, for example, for those same countries in Mali, that 72% of women agree that their husband has the right to beat them when, for example, they've burned the food. So you see that 70% of women agree that men have the right to use physical violence towards women. In Chad, it's even 77%. So these figures are enormously striking in showing the breadth of harmful gender norms that influence society. And so we need to see those linkages between the lack of women in school leadership and these harmful gender norms that influence society in general. And so I think for girls, it's important to see women in leadership positions, but it's also important that they learn to address those harmful gender norms and that they learn to transform them in general. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge kind of connectedness here that we need to address. Veronica, I know that you have also done quite a bit of research on this area. I wonder if you wanted to come in and comment.
Yeah, well, mentoring, formal mentoring as a program has a huge impact on, first, as I told before, development, connecting with their teacher training, at the same time, specifically with retention, and of course, of increasing the well-being. When I talk about well-being, I'm also talking about self-efficacy and other, competencies that are key for these leadership positions. So what I can say about this, is that having a program of mentoring is not just, putting two people talking together. It's something that has to be structured. Leaders are doing the mentoring has to have a training program, how to do that mentoring, what content should be developed on that session, and at the same time, during the mentoring, we have to have the data to look that is effective and to see that both parties, the mentor and the mentee are obtaining the best of that experience. Usually they're like 1 year, of length. That mentoring program are situated in the school, in the context of the leader. It's not something that, should be theoretically, should be based in the context. And yeah, and the evidence is much, the evidence is mostly for mentoring for teachers and not for leaders. But what we are seeing right now is that mostly the same results, you are finding in the leadership mentoring program. That said, and as a final comment, there's no, mentoring program for leaders with the gender issue. So I think that we should develop more research about that, because it's a mentoring program really more based on the leader issue, but not the gender leadership issue. So I foster, that we take care of that, and I'm sure in the next years that we are going to have a lot of evidence about that. It's going to inspire us and give us more direction on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Sister Zeph, wondering from your experience as a teacher, as someone who set up a school, when you were 13, could you comment on some of the practices within your organization that you are kind of scaling up to support both female teachers, but also kind of creating that pipeline for female leadership? You're muted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I will talk about Eline's comment. That was very interesting. I will start from here. When a woman is in a leadership role in a school, I think all of us have witnessed that when a child is a toddler, they say they idealize their parents. When they go to school, they idealize their teacher. And every child says that I want to be a teacher in the initial years of schooling. I was wondering if the school leaders are females, it will not only inspire the female students to be leaders and to get more confidence that I can also do it, but it will also inspire the boys to respect women, to accept that they can also have authority and they can also be in a leadership role. Many students in many developing countries and even in developed countries, we have seen that women are facing still physical and mental violence. I think this is an other way, and this is, in my perspective, this is the fastest way to let the girls and boys, whatever the gender is of a child, to accept that women can also be in a leadership role. First thing. The second thing is, in my school, my priority has always been girls' education, because I have seen, I have always been working in underprivileged communities, and I know what kind of problems they have to face. I did not want to cry on their problems. I wanted to wipe out their tears by giving them a solution. So I started giving them education. I started giving them vocational trainings. I started giving everything to them free of charge. And I started working as a child laborer myself, so they don't have to be child laborers. And I kept them in school. And now there are 30 young women who are in a leadership role. 30 women are working in my school, in my organization. They are accountant, they are HR manager, they are IT officer, they are principal, and they are teachers. So I think if we give them a platform, my school, I started it, as I told you, from the courtyard of my home. It is a proof that if one woman who started working as a child laborer, if one woman can educate 3,000 children, if she can empower 6,000 women, just imagine if we bring more women in a leadership role, it will be the unbelievable result we will see in just a few years. So I also, many years before, when we did not have even internet enough, in 2008 and 2012, I started talking with them about climate change. And now, just tomorrow, 2 of my teachers are going to give a presentation on AI. So I am already teaching them about what is going to happen in future and why and how we have to be prepared for that. So this is how we are bringing out the leadership from the grassroots levels, and we can do it because women everywhere on the planet have potential. They only need a platform, and we have to give them platform, and I am giving them that platform. And I am an example for the world that if I can do it, if we work together towards this cause, we can do wonders for women empowerment, for school leadership, and for everything,
Absolutely.
whatever we want to achieve. Thanks.
Thank you so much. You're basically a living embodiment of how we need to role model women's leadership. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Shifting gears slightly, but again, very connected. Franco, I wanted to turn to you to talk a little bit about the kinds of leadership practices that you've seen adopted through your organization, but also across Peru, to kind of really support the growing kind of female leadership across the country. Sorry if you heard my bell ring.
Thank you, Aashti. So I think that it resonated, the presentation at the beginning, because the way we set up our systems to develop leadership, school leadership, is an invitation to engage with the community, to have different leadership practices than what is usual. And one of them, for example, is that we invite them to think again about how they plan a year or a couple of years in the school. Usually in Peru, the sad reality for a number of schools is that school principals, they copy paste a plan. There's actually a market, an informal market of selling school plans, yearly plans in Peru. And so for these exceptional school principals that come into our program, they do their own plan, but many of them, they have the habit of doing it on their own. No, and we support a process in which maybe around in two months and a half, they really engage in a listening tour of the community and provide spaces for students, teachers, parents to articulate their aspirations. And we've seen female school leaders being the fastest and the most driven in opening up those spaces and changing that mindset of how to plan a school year, for example. We've also seen something really promising, that is how they engage with students in terms of opening leadership opportunities. In Cajamarca, for example, in one of these areas where in the north, in the Andes of Peru, they were promoting the notion of a district that was trying to transform itself to pursue student leadership. So all students finding their purpose and doing things for their community at early age. And a particular pattern that we detected was that we engaged a number of schools. And we observed that in particular, female school leaders were also quicker to change school schedules, or even opening up spaces for students to discuss their own issues in the community. And so that was, these practices of listening, opening spaces that we invite within the program are some of the spaces where we have seen female school leadership thrive.
That's fantastic. So just a more inclusive engagement with the community, trying to bring students in, and just kind of hearing the voices from the ground a little bit better. Thanks. Those are both really excellent examples. Vero, turning to you, could you talk a little bit about the different practices that you've seen amongst teachers that have been effective to create more supportive learning environments?
Thank you. Yeah, what I think is very, at least for me, impressive of these results that the literature in this meta-analysis is presented today is that it's very aligned with the results on the literature on female teachers, for example, that they have in the role of fostering STEM careers on women, or to foster, trajectories that are not very common for females, and the role that female teachers have. So I think that some of them are very similar to one that are presented today, the role modeling, also to give more attention, the same attention to boys and girls, for example, during the interaction during classes, or to have the same, kind of questions that they do to both female, to boys and girls. It's something, it's very obvious, but the literature suggests that teachers, especially male teachers, provide more questions, more challenging questions to boys. So we see, that this type of pedagogical situations, you can maybe extrapolate the same to female leadership. Maybe, they provide the same attention, the same, kind of advisory, and the same teacher expectations. That I think is also something very crucial. They have the same expectations. So they know, also they provide, examples from history that they consider, at the same time, for example, in the STEM career, scientifics are males and also females. So they have the role modeling not only from them as a female teacher, but also the role model that they have from the history behind. And finally, teachers, female teachers that have this impact, specifically, for example, in STEM careers on girls, they acknowledge all the bias that, for example, exists in internet right now, in artificial intelligence, the bias that maybe history has about how they tell different historical events. So they provide also that evidence to students, and so the lenses that they see all this changes a lot, and so they feel more self-confidence and higher expectations.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think that it creates an opportunity for us to think about how we can replicate that or test some of those ideas with women school leaders as well. Finally, to our final segment, where I would love to pick up very quickly, because I'm conscious of time and want to make sure that we have time to pick up some of the excellent questions that we're getting. I wanted to touch on community engagement, because I think the evidence review does suggest that female school leaders are able to, and we've touched on this in the conversation already, are better able to potentially foster partnerships with parents, with communities, and other stakeholders. Eline, I'm going to invite you to comment, please, as well, Sister Zeph, and then potentially ask each of you to kind of give your sort of key takeaways before we open it up to Q&A. So Eline, over to you on kind of the role of women leadership when it comes to community engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aashti. And I think we've touched upon it. And I think, again, going back to that issue of social norms, we know that we cannot only address that in school. So we need community engagement. We need to engage the parents as well. And picking up to what Franco said as well, we know that women school leaders are particularly strong in doing that. And I wanted to pinpoint one particular issue, which is the one of school-related gender-based violence, we also see a growing body of evidence that shows that women teachers and women school leaders are particularly effective in addressing these issues with parents, with communities, also creating safe spaces for girls to address these issues. So I would also say that on the particular topic of school-related gender-based violence, we need more women school leaders to work with communities on these issues. And then just to end, just saying that UNGAI, what we are doing, for example, within our Africa-wide initiative, which is called the Gender at the Center Initiative, we are working exactly with school leaders, with local grassroots organizations, and with young feminist activists on the ground to create those dialogues, to all sit together and to address those harmful gender norms and to really discuss how we can address them together. So that's definitely a model we want to take forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Franco, I also recall that you mentioned some of the work that you're doing in this area. Just wanted to offer you an opportunity to comment. In particular, I think it was around the unpack example.
Something very, very brief. There is a layer of leadership that involves going beyond your school to collaborate, perhaps at a district-wide level. And it's similar in the skills required, right? Like the ability to collaborate, the ability to hold space, etc. In Ancash in particular, and in Cajamarca, we're involved in partnering with entire cities where cross-institutional collaboration is key. And female school leaders are an incredible driver of that work. I just want to add that because it's a different layer of systems transformation that is incredibly promising from our side.
Thank you so much. No, that's excellent. And I wanted to make sure we got to that. And Sister Zeph, finally over to you. I wonder if you could maybe give an example of the kind of community building or community stakeholder building that you've been doing in your area, in your school specifically. You're muted again.
I'm sorry, I could not unmute myself because I'm on my phone and I don't know how to do it on phone. Anyways, you know, community engagement is the backbone when you want to make a change. Since I belong to a minority, it was even more difficult for me to bring girls to a school. But I have learned two things in my life. One is that barriers and challenges are beautiful, and because they give us an opportunity to learn more and to do better. And the second thing is the resilience. Don't give up. Sometimes I have been visiting to a family, and I would request them to send their girl to a school, and they would completely deny. I would try again. I would try again. I would try again. And sometimes it would take 1 to 2 years to convince a family to send their daughter to a school, because most people think that education is not important. The second thing is now, because we have an established school, so what we do, on monthly basis, we organize meetings, parents meetings and community meetings with the people so they can understand the impact we are making. The third thing is the impact we have already made, because people already know what their daughters are doing and where they have reached after. Because in my school, we not only give them 10 years of education, because somebody asked a question here, we also, after completing their 10 years of education, we teach them skills so that they can make enough money to pay for their higher education, and they don't become a burden for the family. So setting an example, stay in touch with the families and the communities, and don't give up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's great. And just in the interest of time, maybe I'm going to start off with you, Vero, to just, what are sort of your 1 or 2 kind of takeaways or actions that sort of emerged from the conversation we've had today, if it's possible to do just really quickly?
Yeah, I have thought a lot about when I'm listening to the other panelists. So really today, my highlights that I take more questions than answers. For example, one reflection that I have right now in Chile, we're working on a principle law that considers, the principal trajectories, and it's associated to different benefits of salaries, program developments, etc. So my first question that I have is, should this framework of principal development and assessment should consider a gender framework? That's my question. And I can extend that to mentorships and other, teacher development programs that we have and principal development programs. So that's my key things that I take today. And I'm gonna, while we are designing this in the Ministry of Education, I'm gonna put that on top of the table and see if it's considered or not. That's my key point that I take today.
Amazing. Already action. Already we are seeing action coming out. That's fantastic. Eline, over to you. Any sort of
Thank you
that stand out?
Yeah, I think from this conversation, I take three main actions. I think one is to work with ministries of education to have targeted policies to recruit, retain, and support women. And I would say throughout the career cycle. So from teacher to school leader to even decision-making spaces within ministries of education. Two is to work with communities to address those social norms that hamper women from accessing and aspiring these leadership positions. And then three, I think for me is a really important one. We need to set up peer support systems for women school leaders, safe spaces where they can share about their challenges, where they can have mentors and more experienced school leaders, and where they can really learn from each other. So I think if there's one thing that UNGAI would love to support on, it's on that last one. Thank you.
Those are three really great takeaways and actually reminded me of what Sister Zeph has sort of created and cultivated in her school. So let me go over to you, Sister Zeph, very, your kind of key takeaway.
There are a lot of people who are trying to make a difference, and we have a hope. I'm taking hope from here, from all these beautiful people.
Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Franco, the closing words before we turn over to the Q&A.
Similar sentiment than sisters said. I was thinking about reaching out to the ministry, and it's a young policy. In Latin America, school principals is a young policy, so this comes in a timely manner. To just resonate on what Eline said about not treating all those principles as if they were in the same circumstance. There is a real opportunity to bring the discussion of gender into this area of policy, into all the phases. And second, I think what Sister said about young girls telling you at young age that they want to be school principals. I think that building those bridges more intentionally because the role modeling is happening. I wonder if we can make it more intentional in terms of inspiring young kids with these kinds of roles.
And I think those are, each of you has said, has given some really practical takeaways, and then echoing Sister Zeph, just giving me a lot of hope that we can actually see some concrete actions come out of today's conversation. We had some really good questions. We don't have too much time, so I'm just going to pick up two and invite whomever on the panel would like to answer. So the first one was a question really around how there is obviously a correlation between the lack of female leadership connected to the lack of access to opportunities to education for girls from an early age. So how can we actually enhance the access to quality education for girls and women so we can create that pipeline for leadership positions? And invite any one of you to pick that up. Please, Eline, go for it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a critical point, and it's a two-way direction, right? You need to improve the access, but in order to improve the access for girls, you need those role models in leadership positions as well. And I think to improve the access for girls to education, there's a whole package of strategies you need to put in place. What ONGAI is doing is we're working with a concept that is called gender responsive education planning, where we really work with ministries of education to make sure that the whole education system becomes gender responsive. And that's not something you do in 1 or 2 months. It's a really strong package of strategies you need to put in place. You need to have financial incentives. You need to work on the social norms where some girls still drop out because they are married, because they become pregnant. So you need to work with the health sector to address these issues. So there's a whole package of strategies you need to put in place. But I think what is essential is that within a Ministry of Education, people are aware of these issues and they get committed to work on these issues. Thank you.
Fantastic. Eline, I wonder if there are any sort of links to those tools that you might be able to share in the chat, or maybe the GSL team can share those out, because that would be really, really useful. And then the second question that struck me was just, and this was highlighted in the evidence review, was, and Eline, you pointed to it as well, is just the inequity. Oftentimes in several countries, you see female teachers, but you see a disproportionate number of those teachers becoming school leaders. What can we do to improve that underrepresentation of female school leaders, particularly in contexts where you have large female teacher bodies as well? And invite any one of you again to pick that up.
I can just
please go for it, Veronica.
Yeah, I can just give some data, that during the first year of experience, teachers, 20%, at least in Chile, and I think mostly in Latin American countries and around the world, 20% of teachers leave 10% permanently, another 10%, for a while, the teaching career. So the first years of experience of teachers, we have done so much effort to attract them, to train them in the most, quality way, that we should put all our effort on those first years of experience, where they improve a lot the teaching, the effectiveness, their self-confidence. And so those years, I would highlight that we should put a lot of focus on mentoring teachers. And after this conversation, we should maybe definitely include the gender issue there, because there's something that was not here in the conversation, and I'm not going to open a new topic, but it's about flexible work and how this has not been included in the teaching profession or leadership positions during schools. I'm just going to put that topic on top, but I'm sure that if we move forward on that and we are able to somehow include this on the school schedule, we are going to move forward on having more leadership female positions too.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we are at time here. So let me just thank each one of you for joining us, for providing your perspective and sharing your experience on this area. I think we've seen how complex and interconnected some of these issues are, but I think you've also laid out some very clear strategies and potential things that we can do within our own organizations to try and change some of this going forward. So thank you again. And with that, let me hand over to Maggie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this fascinating conversation. Thank you to each of the panelists for their powerful insights, to Franco, Sister Zeph, Vero, Eline, and of course, to Aashti for beautifully guiding and connecting us in the discussion. Thank you to the GSL team for all the work behind this webinar. And of course, a big thank you to you all who have joined us and listen and ask so many questions and leave some resources in the chat too. If you're interested in this topic, please don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for many more updates on gender and school leadership. And again, thank you. Have an amazing rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. It was very interesting.